So my name's Christina McGreevy. I'm the Client Services Manager here at Accountant Online. I handle all of our new inquiries coming in and match your needs to the relevant accounting and service teams. So we're joined today by Michael, who will go through discussing employee share options with you. And I'll hand over to Michael that can do a little bit of an introduction on SeedLegals. And Michael himself is co-founder of Tech Accelerator in Belfast as well, called Raise Ventures. So thank you, Michael, for joining us this morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for taking the time to talk. Yes, apologies for the slight delay there. Of the joy of trying to use Zoom and share screens. You'd think by this stage we'd all be dab hands, but two laptops don't seem to want to share their screens, so we'll see how we get on. So SeedLegals, I'm not sure how many people out there know who we are, but we are a legal platform set up about 4 or 5 years ago in the UK with the main objective of helping early stage startups carry out those essential tasks that often law firms can charge an awful lot of money for and can be slow and difficult to deal with, such as getting your early cap table set up and understanding what that looks like, and using a platform to be able to put together team agreements, advisor agreements, standardized documentation that you're used to. And then when you come to do investment rounds or funding rounds, you can use the platform to create your own term sheets, use the platform to carry out those basic board approvals and shareholder approvals and other documents that you need for a funding round. We can also help you if you're planning to raise money in the UK, arrange SCIS and EIS advance assurance. And we can also use our pitch tool, which allows you to share out your pitch deck. So if you're planning a funding round, we're standing there to help. And we also have a great SAFE, which is a subscription and an advanced subscription agreement for investment rounds. But today we're going to talk about share options. So just before we start, I think it's useful just to understand what stage we're all at. So I think if you want to share and chat, just let us know. If you're a founder who's planning to launch a new business, if you're well into that startup journey, or if you're a seasoned, experienced entrepreneur looking to explore options for a team that you have. So obviously we all have varying knowledge about these things. When you go up, when you head out to start a startup, you don't often know these things.
Yeah, so Michael, you'd like all of the attendees to share in the chat whether they're planning on investment, really? Is that the question?
Well, yes, I think so. I think understanding what stage you're at as a business. When we were discussing this earlier, Mike, when I was chatting with with Christina and her colleagues, to be honest, I think we almost fell down into a rabbit hole of cap tables, share issuances, what shares companies have, what shares companies don't have. But I think really what we were talking about was the whole understanding of startups. What makes a startup different often from a small business is that a startup sets out to scale and grow quickly, and there's always an expectation there's going to be multiple funding rounds within that. And that's the position often where share options become more and more important, because the whole point of a share option is to incentivize your team. So when you come to exit, everyone can share in that success. So that's good. Great. Marina there's just mentioned that she's just setting up her business. And I think that this is then the time where you can then plan for the future. And if you're planning to build something, to scale it and to exit, understanding where you sit around share options right at the beginning is really useful. If you have already set up your business and you're well on that journey, there's probably just some additional admin that you'll have to consider and think about, but we'll come to that. So Christina, do you want to click through there to the third slide, or the fourth slide?
Sorry, I just wanted to be sure that you were able to see my my screen, so that's shared perfectly fine for you then. Great. Okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry. It was clicking through too quickly on me. So you've covered this then, the that you're the Ireland country manager for SeedLegals, and what you're going to discuss today. Have you?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Okay,
yes.
and the agenda and everything.
Yeah.
So you want me to go to slide 4, is it?
Yes, that one's great.
Great.
So if we just kick off about what are share options, it's something that we hear about a lot and we read about a lot. Really, what share options are a way of incentivizing your team and giving them the opportunity to have a share in your business at the point where that having a share is going to be worth genuine value and they can share in the success of the business. I think well, as I said, they're sort of a placeholder. So they're saying that this member of staff can have a share in the future. Why it's often better to do it that way rather than just giving straight equity is that if you allow someone to be a shareholder within your company, holding on to shares, that then means that those people have specific rights over your business as they are partial owners, and that then can be a very heavy administrative burden for you as a company. If you have lots of people with small shareholdings, when you come to make big decisions and when you want to move and when you want to do things, you don't necessarily want to have lots of people having shares in your business. Also, if people come to leave your business, trying to get shares returned or back off people is very, very difficult as well. So what options do is give you the flexibility as a business owner to be able to reward and incentivize staff without having them as actual shareholders on the cap table. So we can go on to the next slide.
Okay, great. Sorry now.
So why give share options? I think it's all about some of the challenges that we face with startups at the minute in Ireland. It's very hard to find staff. It's very hard often to motivate staff and to retain them, particularly within startups, because you're often on a very fast, accelerated growth plan. Because people often come on to do one specific role and find themselves doing half a dozen different roles, and because often there's the carrots at larger, more stable companies who maybe offer bigger salaries. What stock options do is give everyone the shared experience and the shared opportunity within the business. Next slide.
Great, thanks for that, Michael. And as you say, it's so important, to be competitive for employee retention. And particularly in that startup landscape, it's very competitive, for those sort of, in particular, those roles that founders need to develop their business. So you would find that employee share options are really common as an incentive to stick with the startup in those sort of early tough stages.
I think exactly. I think trying to get people in and keep them. And yeah, I think you can't just keep raising salaries or offering slightly more untangible, maybe complete flexibility around time they're at work or like 3 or 4 day weeks, things like that. Within startups, within very, very small teams, it gets very, very difficult to be as flexible as employees often want you to be. Now you have to be sensitive to them, and it's part of the recruitment process. But I think what you're really trying to do is get that shared, that shared vision, that shared participation, and then that shared success at the end, when the success is achieved. And I think we have a few statistics in the next couple of slides that were carried out in a study. Now I know this was Great. With UK startups, but it just helps to confirm that it actually does work. If everyone feels that they're all helping to get your company to where you want it to be, to get that shared success.
Yeah, perfect. And it ties into that culture piece that you're going to discuss about now as well, really, doesn't it?
Well, that's the thing. I think culture within all businesses is so important, because the very nature of entrepreneurial founders are often, they're highly driven, and they're very focused on what it is they're trying to achieve. They lose sight of the simple things in life around when it's appropriate often to contact staff inside hours, outside hours, or what they expect them to do, or if they expect them to sort of to be a brand ambassador and to carry the company. If you're a member of staff and you don't have a share in the company and you don't have any future interest in it, I think often staff start to question, why should I take that extra step? Why should I put my personal brand, my personal reputation out there on behalf of the company? And really what share options are trying to do is say, you're part of the family, you're part of the team, and you will get the success if you carry it along through with us.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
So if we move on to the next slides, yes. So these are just studies that were carried out, which really shows that once people do become have share options and have an access to shares in the company, they therefore do take a little bit of a step up. Now, I think that first comment is slightly, the 82% who would take some direct action if people aren't pulling their weight and driving things forward. I think that can be spectacularly misconstrued. But I think it's a general sentiment that these comments are trying to get through, show that share options really do work. So if we go on, we'll get into some of the nitty gritty of what an actual. Now, I think it's very, very important that before you start carrying out an investment or a share option scheme, that you really do have that long-term strategy piece in place. You have to understand and work with your board and work with probably your accountants to really understand where the business is going to go and how you're going to get it to that point. I think that becomes very, very important, because if you then sit around as a board and decide, right, we're going to get the company to a certain point. So say you're a small tech development firm who are working very closely with a couple of big clients. If you understand as a business that you're going to build out and develop a piece of tech which is going to have a specific part to play within a bigger organization, and you already know from the nature of conversations that there's a very good chance that rather than be a customer, they're going to buy you. You might then decide that you're going to offer share options to get to that point, to get to that exit. What you might also decide at that point is, actually, we can see our exit within the next 18 months really on the window. We know that we can pay contractors and build a team to get us to that exit point. So perhaps maybe offering out options aren't the right thing to do, because we know where we're going to get to, and there's not really the long-term multiple funding rounds that the share options would make more sense. So I think it's really important to understand what you're going to do and how you're going to get there. But still, we appreciate that there has to be flexibility and the ability to pivot and all around this.
Okay, so you would say that to offer before you would even decide to offer employee share options, you would really have to consider your long-term strategy, prepare your cap table, all of that, Michael, and really have everything aligned before you would, and decide what your future plan is for the business before you would enter into this.
Absolutely, and I think that's the same with everything that you do around shares in your business. I think I see all too often early stage founders who give out who give out actual shares to their first development team. Everyone gets 1% of the business. And then so maybe you've got 5 developers, everyone gets 1%. Then the CTO gets a 15% share in the company. You've already lost then 20% of your business to the teams and the people who are there. Which means then when you go out to raise investment, potential investors are then going to expect to take maybe 10% in the first investment round as well. Already you're up then to a quarter of your business, and if you have a co-founder, As you can see already, you're very quickly losing control of your business, and also big enough shareholding to incentivize you to really drive and grow it and get to exit. So this is why you have to plan what you're going to earn each funding round, and then plan out what your cap table looks at in those different rounds. Now we could, and do you know something, Christina? We could do a whole morning session on modelling this out and different cap tables. So what I suggest is, if this is something which is important to you and you're on the call, I'm sure that the team at Accountants Online will be able to help you map out what cap tables can look like and what they can do, and we can do the same here at SeedLegals. So if this is something you're planning, take advice as early as you can.
Yeah, and Michael, actually, we don't provide the support with cap tables, so it would be something that we would be recommending your services. So the fact that you're able to support the businesses that when they do, come to need looking at their cap table and taking on that investment, that your team are able to support them there with all of that aspect. That's really great to know as well. That's
great, brilliant. Yes, and we have partner law firms and things as well who can help you if things get very complicated as well. So there's plenty of support out there if needed.
Yes, fantastic, Michael. Thank you. Do you want me to move on to the next slide?
Yes, yeah, that would be great, because already an hour we've bitten off far much more than we can chew.
Okay.
So yeah, and this is just an example of a cap table there of what it can look like. So you can go on to the next slide. We'll start talking about different types of share option schemes.
Sure. I was just going to mention at this point, a recording will be sent after the webinar so that everyone gets access to this. So if you're worried about the slides that you've missed, you will get the recording after and be able to review all of this information again.
Exactly.
Thanks, Michael.
And yes, and I'm also happy to share out the slides specifically and answer any specific questions after the event. So you'll probably read in the press a fair bit at the minute, and I know Scale Ireland are working hard on it. But currently the revenue offer what is called keep and unapproved option schemes. So really where the government approved scheme is really designed is to help make sure that taxation doesn't become a significant barrier to people offering share options in their companies, and that's a little link there I think you're sharing. Currently, so, and I'm not going to go into much detail about this because tax really isn't our area, but if someone is offered a share option, and then when that option is exercised, the member of staff will then be expected to pay tax on that and to complete start completing and sharing tax returns, even if they're PAYE employees. Now, there is a government scheme called KEEP, which limits that tax exposure to the employees. However, the administrative burden around a company using KEEP is very challenging. You have to regularly report to the revenue. You have to do regular valuations of your business, and it can be administratively very, very burdensome, which is why Scale Ireland are working very closely with the revenue to try and get them to make significant reforms to this. And sort of anecdotally, we're being told by a lot of founders that it's actually the cost of the administration of using KEEP could often that money could be used to help employees with any tax exposure they have on the issuing of shares. So what we find are most people are used unapproved, and that's what we offer here at SeedLegals is an unapproved scheme. And if you want to use KEEP, there's specialist accountants and providers out there who do that. So an unapproved scheme really benefits any member of staff, and it also gives you an awful lot of flexibility as founders, as boards and directors, to make sure that you set up a scheme which is right for you and your startup, because every startup's different. And while we want to keep it as standardized as possible, we want to just give you the flexibility that you need. So
terrible name, Michael, as you would say, unapproved, but as you say, it's the most commonly used in practice, actually, isn't it?
Exactly. It's one of those horrible words that HMRC in the UK use it, the Irish Revenue use it. It is sort of, this is what happens when civil servants name things. They're very literal. So the only people it's not approved by is it's just unapproved by the revenue, meaning that you're not going to actually. Anyway, so
yeah,
what you have to think about when you start doing a funding round, or what are their scheme rules? This means that that most employees will have the same rules around the option scheme, and the rules usually include the vesting period, which is the timescales and when they're going to be offered and given the share options. Exercise, this is when those options get converted into shares. Good and bad leaver terms, this is so when members of staff leave, they can either use that opportunity to exercise their options into shares and you're happy for them to be shareholders, or if you have a board for their bad leaver and they don't get the overall scheme limit. That's sort of an administrative process to make sure that where we showed cap tables earlier, what the limit is within your cap table, and then what approval is needed internally to get the options. So I'll go through these each in a little bit more detail.
And Michael, as part of SeedLegals service, do you provide support on drafting out all of these agreements in terms of that each step, sort of, and all of the conditions of whether or not it's a good or bad leaver,
Absolutely. So how the SeedLegals platform works is that it's a brilliantly self-serve product. You go onto the platform and you put in the details of your company and the member of staff. Then we take you through a series of questions asking you how you want to set up your scheme with guidance notes along the way. So you
great.
Create your own, and then we have a CX team standing by. So there's a chatbot, and there's real people behind there who can explain what everything means.
Okay, great. Thank you. That just sort of helps to understand, because I'm sure there's some of our attendees that are on here that are thinking, gosh, there's so much more involved in this than I realized, in all of the considerations. So it's that you're on hand to take them through that entire process. That's great to hear.
Exactly. And and it seems really difficult and it seems really complicated. But thankfully it's not really. Once you get the scheme set up, and then there's bits of paper that need shared and signed, but we can talk through all those. I think I duplicated that slide. So
that's perfect. So we're switching to vesting.
Through into vesting. So vesting is the period. Vesting is when you actually give people their share options. You might read places where they'll mention things called vesting cliffs. To be honest, I don't even think cliff is the right word that they should be using, but it's widely used. So this is the period before the vesting starts. Usually a member of staff will start, and within their employment contract, they'll be told, this is your salary, and if you work with us for X amount of time, you'll then be eligible for share options on the board's approval. So that's your first little protection there as a company. You can make sure that the person who's working for you, you feel they're going to be a long-term fit, you feel that their role is going to have a long-term role, and you feel that they're part of the company. And that all can be proved out before you actually issue the shares. And usually it's 6 months to a year that the person has to work with the company before they get that. Okay, and I think that's what I'm saying. I think the most important thing about the vesting is to make sure that they're then not all issued at one point. So option holders earning over a period of time, this means that they don't get all their options in one lump. They then go into a vesting scheme, and often they're given their salary plus another small option as they go along. and this means that they can they're earning their options as they go, so they don't. Yeah, it just helps continuously motivate rather than just one big lump of options.
Okay, perfect.
And this can also be driven by milestones as well. So that's another way of making targets and staff appraisals and all that other good stuff. You have a few other carrots to offer rather than just salary reviews. And also in periods of great salary inflation, you need to have that little bit of flexibility.
Of course.
Okay, so everyone in your company then has signed up to the option scheme, and they have got their options, and they're being shared out over a period of time. So they're sitting there. When they actually get converted into shares is what is known as exercising those options. And as we saw earlier, it's important to consider when this happens for taxation reasons. A very good example, I think we could probably go on to the next slide actually, Christina, but I think you may have read in the press at the minute that our friends at Stripe are currently going through a significant funding round. Now, why they've had to go through this funding round, according to the press, is because that they offered out a lot of options to staff quite early on, and they didn't have those options at an exit-only moment. They had them based on milestones, and the company has achieved a lot of those milestones, but they haven't managed to either exit or IPO or get to that exit point, which will have been stated within the original option scheme. So those other exit moments or milestones can be things such as Series A or Series B, investment rounds at a certain level, or strategic investments from competitors and things. You can define what those exit only milestones are, because you want to have that little bit of flexibility. But the great thing is on exercise, the staff get their share of so they can then cash those shares in at that point, and therefore they can benefit from your exit as well as themselves.
Great, Michael. And no doubt there'll be plenty of case studies about Stripe's case, in the months to come, to really sort of deep dive into the learnings there, because no doubt there's been a lot. But as you say, you're sort of even giving this heads up already that it's not just to consider the milestone being the total exit, but building in those considerations. And really, when you're building out this employee share option scheme, maybe to be aspirational and to give that best case scenario of what would happen rather than just being safe in your assumptions. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, no, I think that's absolutely it. Because you want everyone to drive for that big picture. I've been involved with lots and lots of startups, and we often find ourselves in situations where the company's going through a bit of a tricky and a difficult time. And they know that they have to get over a specific bump to then get to this exit point. And I know fine rightly that a lot of people would leave the company at that point because it gets really, really tough before it gets easier again. And having that, having staff with options and having that exit and be able to point to where they'll get some reward for that, I think it's really, really, really important. I think that's why it's important to keep them sort of tied in with these things.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
But however, on the flip side, if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about good and bad leaver clauses.
Sure.
These are really, really important as well. What you want to be able to do with you as a founder and owner want to try and control and manage the equity of your business as best you can. The shareholding in your company, you want to be able to control that. And good leaver and bad leaver clauses are really important. Good leaver is often, in regards to share options, what you would often say to a good leaver is you can leave if you're leaving the company on mutual consent, and that is often the role that you're doing. Has you've completed specific tasks which we don't really need you anymore. If you've, say, developed a certain area of the business and you pivot on something slightly different, you may lose some staff at that point. You might say to them, yes, you can keep your options and you've got 90 days to exercise those and become a shareholder. However, if someone leaves to go to work for a competitor, if someone leaves because you feel that they have to leave due to their actions, then you can just cancel the option. So they won't then have a chance to exercise that in the future, and those options go back into the pot. To be honest, within startups, most I think bad leaver often isn't that bad. It can often just be junior members of staff who work for a year and move on to something else. Sales guys who get a little bit fed up and move on to something else. Similarly, other roles where people just leave. Usually, if you just leave because you want to go on and do something new, that can be classified as a bad leaver, and you can cancel those options. The definition of who's a good leaver and who's a bad leaver is usually determined by the it's usually decided by the board and the directors, so you don't have to worry about fair employment law and things like that. To making sure that you just always within your terms of your option scheme say the board decide who's a good leaver and who's a bad leaver. But just be careful about reputational stuff. But we all know what that's about as well.
Okay.
Okay. So just going on to the next bit. So everyone has set up their scheme and they're at exit. And then on exit, everyone then gets to become a shareholder, and they get to share in the success of the business. And I think, as we've sort of discussed here, it sounds quite complicated, but once you get the scheme set up and they're all being issued out, it is very straightforward. And I think that try not trying to shout out SeedLegals too much. But what we try and do in SeedLegals is make sure that your scheme, your rules, your documentation, and everything is held within the same platform, which means as you go along, you can clearly see who's got what options, that everyone's signed all the documents that they should have signed, and that you have all the correct approvals from your board, that you have all the correct approvals from directors, and that you're keeping people informed of what's happening within the business. Where I have also seen is that there's another high-profile Irish startup in the press who I won't name, who are going through a very difficult time at the minute. But what might have been reflective of how they were managing the business was that we got an inquiry from them quite recently, before things got difficult. A lot of staff had been issued staff contracts, and within that contract they were told to be eligible for share options. However, no scheme had ever been created or set up, which meant then staff were coming and asking for share options, which literally there's no mechanism to give them. So what I would stress is that this is something to get arranged as early as you can, to make sure that there's shareholding available and that you do have the flexibility to be able to implement the scheme when you're ready for it. The cost of doing this is high for startups, but not ridiculously high. You can get a scheme set up and put in place for €2,000. So I know with startups, £2,000 is a lot of cash to give out, but it's if you've got staff who are ready to go, who are ready to do this, it's a price worth paying. And as I say, you keep all your stuff in the one place.
And a massive learning there, Michael, from that case that you've just mentioned, that if you have it built into your contracts from the beginning, that it's really important to follow through with it, because the implications can be huge then. So would you say that it's best to avoid putting it in something that is as tangible as an employment contract, and wait until you are actually ready, and have all of those steps put in place? As much as you say, it's great to be aspirational when you're looking at laying out an employee share option scheme, but actually including in an employment contract is something, because if you have a lot of conditions, I suppose, essentially within the employee share option scheme, whereas the employment contract is a lot more sort of black and white, really, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think all contracts should be consistent. And I think and as I say, you can, don't say you're going to do things and don't do them. Like in all aspects of life, I suppose.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah,
exactly. But I think and I understand it's something to be careful about as well. There's so many contract templates floating around the internet at the minute, which look okay and look right, but I think, as we all know, within contracts, 2 clauses can scupper you for good. So don't mess about with contracts. Make sure you know what you're preparing and what you're asking people to sign. But as I say, and it's not too complicated just to set up the basic, the basic scheme rules. I think that's you can set up a sort of a skeleton share option scheme very, very quickly, just to get you started, so everyone knows where you sit and what you're going to do. But you don't actually. But you then have, from when you start, you'll probably have that 6 months to a year cliff, where you don't have to get the other bits of paper and all organized.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do you want me to switch to the next slide there, Michael?
Yes, yes, that would be great.
Okay, perfect.
So, and as I said, there's a few documents that you need to prepare when creating a share scheme. You have to notify, if you have other shareholders, you have to make sure that you notify other shareholders. You also have to notify your board as well, and have date of adherence as well. And when you do your there's also forms you have to send into the CRO and revenue to just let them know that you have a scheme in place. This is also something that appears in the press like clockwork every year, where the revenue point out that they will be checking to make sure any companies who have given share options and exercise options, let us know, because even if you don't let us know, we know who you are and we will find you. That nice annual revenue press release. So just get up and in front of that as well.
Yeah, that's it. And I suppose that's where your accountant can support you, where we can inform revenue on your behalf. Accountants Online have a company secretary team as well that a lot of you that are our clients would already be aware of, but we can support you with any of those share transfers or share allotments that you need to do. And Michael, you touched on earlier sort of that cap table and planning for the future, but if someone has set up, let's say, their business with €1 shares, and then they have to go and make those changes in order to be able to set up their cap table appropriately for going after funding. That's something that our company secretary team can take care of as well. So if there are changes that need to happen to your own as founders shareholding initially, in order to allow you to put in place these agreements, then there are certain steps that we'd be able to support you with. We have a question from Neat there about whether it's solicitors or accountants who are best to set up these documents. So it would be beyond the scope of an accountant. But Michael, this is something SeedLegals can help with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So SeedLegals, we can help you set up all these documents in a self-serve and supported way. And then if you come to us with questions that we feel are more appropriate for your accountant, say you start asking things like valuations of your business, or modeling out financials to support things, or as you say, that's when we would point you to your accountant. And if you need to do share splits and that company secretariat activity, we would pass across. But what we would do is tell you what you'd suggest. So we can't advise. So we would suggest the sort of things that you probably want organized. And I just saw a question there about contractors. Yes. These schemes are perfect for contractors. Usually what happens if the revenue keep scheme was better and could be used for PAYE staff, that's, I think, where we're hoping that will get to the point where it's great for PAYE staff and it's easy to use and not an administrative burden. And when you have a situation like where you have PAYE staff and you have contractors, these unapproved schemes are perfect for them. And if you've got contractors, you can then have specific terms around when they exercise. If they complete their contract and they leave, often you allow them to have 90 days to then exercise their options.
Okay. Yes. So there's just some additional clauses that can be built into those agreements to allow for contractors as well. That's good to know, Michael. Thank you. And thank you, Thomas, for asking that question, and for Neat for your question earlier. Great, thank you. Do you want me to stay on this slide, Michael, or are we ready to move on to the next slide?
Yeah, I think that's I think we're on to my closing slide after this one.
Okay, perfect.
My contact details.
Okay, great, thank you. So as Michael has included here, he can be contacted at michaelm@seedlegals.com. You can reach me and my team on hello@accountantonline.ie as well. So if you do have any questions for sort of either the accounting or company secretarial side, or indeed any questions about SeedLegals, or look for that support. So if anyone has any questions, we have the Q&A where you can share your questions anonymously now to both myself and Michael, or indeed if you have any questions about any of these documents. So the letter that you've included there in your sample slide here, Michael, is that setting out sort of a sample of what the share option scheme agreement would look like? Is that the scheme rules and covers all of the
exactly aspects? So once you go through setting it up on the platform, then is the documents that you need, and that's just an example of the letter that would go out to the member of staff, explaining what options are being offered, what the period is, and the other specific details that they need to be kept aware of. One thing also to mention to members of staff as well is that they'll probably come to you and start asking you specific questions about their specific tax position and issues around that. As board and directors, you have a sort of responsibility to tell them to go and get independent legal or financial advice. Don't get yourself trapped into a position of trying to represent both yourself and their specific needs as well, which is often quite a complicated conversation to have with a 23-year-old developer. But geez, it's all part of growing up, isn't it? We all have to go and have these difficult conversations with people. So
indeed, yes. Yeah, and I think it's when you're in that sort of a startup network, as you say, it's either going to be a sharp learning curve for you, or it's something that you may have heard of before, or be familiar with. But yeah, the obligation to complete a capital gains tax return is really important, and even filing their own income tax returns each year. So as you say, it's so important to advise your staff that there may be obligations that they have when they are exercising. So really important to set that out in the agreement as well, that sort of instruction, really, Michael, is it?
Yes, it is indeed. It maps out exactly what's going to happen and when. So no surprises, no confusion. And I think that's really, really important as well.
Great.
Because I think around the bad leaver and the good leaver side of things as well, just to be clear about that with them. So that if they go, they don't, the shares don't necessarily travel with them.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Michael, as part of your service, you obviously help with sort of setting out the agreement and everything. And as you say, you have a standard framework that they can access, and then they can ask any specific questions, and it's whether or not it's suitable for you to answer, or you refer them to the necessary people that they should reach out to. But in terms of ongoing support and queries or questions that the founders may have when sort of setting out this agreement and displaying it to their employees and rolling it out, are you on hand then as support, or are you able to sort of arrange a retainer agreement with you in order to get that?
Yeah, how we sort of operate is that usually people on and unlock the scheme. So they set up the scheme, and then we won't hear from for 6 months.
Okay.
Then first members of staff will be eligible for their options. We would then expect our customers to then get in touch with us again, and then we'll help them get that right documentation prepared and issued out to the members of staff that they need. We can also you can monitor the signing of those on the platform as well. But if there's any issues around that, we often have it's often really manual little things like email addresses not put in properly, or people have changed email little things like that. We can monitor, or people not signing things. We can let the founder or the board know, yeah, these things need to be tidied up and get done, and then we make sure that everything's then completed. Just to keep everybody right.
Great. Okay. And Michael, you've touched on sort of 2 examples that we've discussed today. Do you have any examples of a really successful rollout of an employee share option scheme where, there's been sort of a couple of different tiers? I appreciate him putting you on the spot just now.
Yeah, no. I think there's quite a few good examples that we have. I won't necessarily mention company names, but we have a good local. Well, actually, one other question I was going to ask, if there's anyone in Northern Ireland on the call, we can also, or if you have staff in the UK, we can also help with EMI schemes, which is the UK equivalent of Keep. So if you have teams who are based in Ireland and the North or across the water, there's specific things that we can do to help you around that. But I think good examples of companies with good exits. There's a couple of companies in Northern Ireland who were part of the First Derivatives, sort of spin-outs from First Derivatives, who then brought some staff alongside them. They knew that they were going to use the funds that they got for First Derivatives, but also do some other multiple funding rounds. They then brought staff. They didn't poach staff across, they brought on new teams. And we're able to offer them options in the new spin out that had just been created. And as it grew, they grew up, and then they were actually floated on the London Stock Exchange. So those shareholders then all got the choice of either exercising their shares to shares and then cash them in, or they then moved them on to the new publicly listed shares. So they then became shareholders within the IPO'd company. And
fantastic.
And that's actually that's a whole other webinar to then start talking about owning shares in publicly listed companies. To be honest, I need to bring in a colleague to talk through that one, because that's a whole other minefield. But
okay, good to know. Okay, but thank you for sharing that success story. It seems like we don't have any other questions, so thank you so much for your time, Michael. You've obviously covered so much information there, and as I've mentioned earlier, the recording of the webinar will be shared. Thank you so much for taking the time to go through employee share options and answering all of our questions, Michael. It's been lovely speaking with you this morning, and thank you to all of our attendees for your interaction and your questions. It's been really beneficial for me to get a sense of this deep dive into employee share options as well, Michael. So thank you for answering all of my questions, and lovely speaking with you this morning. Have a good day, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.